Hi, everyone. This is Roj from Lifestyle Mastery, and today I'm excited to have Matthew Brennan, who's a speaker and writer focusing on Chinese internet and tech innovation. In particular, he's known for his analysis of WeChat, China's famous super app, and ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok. His opinions have been featured in global media, including The Economist, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, BBC, Financial Times, and others. He delivers presentations to executive teams seeking to gain insight into Chinese tech innovation. His company, China Channel, organizes China's largest annual WeChat digital marketing conference for international companies. Mal co-hosts the China Tech Talk podcast produced together with Chinese largest English tech media tech node. The podcast unpacks Chinese tech innovation and features guests such as Dr. Kai-Fu Lee and companies such as Xiaomi, Tencent, GDN, Wall Street Journal. Matthew's new book, Attention Factory: The Story of TikTok and Chinese ByteDance is out now. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, you have an interesting journey because you spent in China for 16 years. What got you so interested to be in China and learn more about startups?
Yeah, I came to China straight out of university. I studied economics in the UK, and then I planned to stay for 1 year just to have a break between that and entering the workforce, probably in London, in the city. But I stayed to learn Chinese because I saw that China was just going through this golden age, essentially, which I think it still is in a golden age. But the growth and change in society was just incredible. All around you, there was construction and this growth story of you can see that in the GDP numbers in China. If you, everyone who's probably familiar with that and knows of this sort of economic miracle that's happened over the last 2 decades, 3 decades. And I was just in the middle of that basically, and saw, it just made going back to London feel just so boring. There was so much opportunity, and I only grabbed a small part of it, really. I mean, it's just still today it's still pretty amazing, but it has calmed down, and it's over time has become more and more developed. Certainly in places like Shanghai today, it feels like Tokyo or London or any sort of major global city in terms of its development, but that really wasn't the case when I arrived. And so that's really the story of why I stayed in China, was to take part in that in some small way. And I moved along the way through the education industry. I moved into specializing in content and online content in particular. And I before I got into WeChat marketing and covering Chinese digital and what I do today, I was involved in ed tech industry in China for several years. And I built out one of the earliest educational K-12 software choice, because it wasn't fully online at the time. It was mostly offline, delivered for a CD, because the infrastructure wasn't there in these cities that we were trying to reach in sort of inland China. But we came very early to that, and it was really tough to get Chinese to see value in software back then, because it was a time in China's history where and there still is this perception amongst a lot of people that anything online should be free, and there was software piracy was rampant. And this is the case across many areas. I'm in Southeast Asia today, and I think there's also a similar issues here. So we were facing those challenges, and but that was really before this explosion in mobile happened. I think from 2011, essentially everything changed, and that was when iPhone 4 came out, which just completely went crazy in China, and this new mobile era of innovation really started from then. And again, I'm just sort of playing a small part in that, I feel, but it's really just unimaginable what's happened in the last 10 years.
Absolutely. I think Charlie Munger, one of the greatest investors, have said that the Chinese growth has been one of the greatest compounded growth ever seen in the history of mankind. So it's very exciting to know that you've been in China during that growth. And you've written the book about Attention Factory, and you've been into online content, and what is TikTok all about? Just for listeners, so they can understand if they haven't used the product before.
Sure. I mean, the book I wrote last year is Attention Factory. It's about a story of TikTok, the story of the company behind TikTok, ByteDance, right? So ByteDance is coming up to, for people who aren't familiar with ByteDance, I'm sure many of the listeners are, but I'm sure some of them aren't as much as they probably should be, because this is the next Facebook, this company, in terms of valuation and revenue. You look at the charts and you'll see clearly it's on course to reach up to that level in a few years. And it probably will surpass Facebook at some point, in terms of both revenue and users. So, and that's including, Facebook's entire suite family of apps. ByteDance is a company that everyone in tech should know a lot about. Essentially, it's really a big giant now. It's in China. It's basically on the same level as Alibaba and Tencent, and it has potential to even be bigger than those local giants one day. So that's a story that has really this is like a 9-year-old company, essentially. It's a very young company compared, like Alibaba, Tencent are like 20 plus years old. Google's well over 20 years old now. Facebook's younger, but still, this is just younger than all of these companies. It's more like a Snapchat, really, in terms of its age. And really only it got to a mid-sized level in China up to about 2016. And then it was just really this short video trend that we've seen originally with Douyin and later with TikTok that has propelled them up into the big league. And really, that is unimaginable. I think if you go back to 2016, if you ask me, are you really interested in ByteDance? I'd probably be like, yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's not the most interesting company. And suddenly everything changed about 4 or 5 years ago. And so, yeah, I think people's expectations have yet to catch up, and their understanding of how important this is yet to catch up. If you can look at the latest data for TikTok, right, I'll just give you one angle to think about it. I was just looking at App Annie's latest report from the State of Mobile 2021. So if you go into that, you see that App Annie's like very clearly said, TikTok's basically taking over from Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, all of these big apps, mostly Facebook, but even including like YouTube, as like the #1 place where people spend time now across pretty much every developed market. That trend is about 2 years, roughly 2 years behind what we saw in China. And what's even more interesting is I think that trend is just in the early days. I think it's actually can double again in terms of the amount of attention, users, time spent, and it can. The advertising is even, it's very tiny to where it will be. So people already know TikTok and are aware of it and how important. Trust me, it's still early days. It's still early days. Just look at what's happening in China, or like where I am in Southeast Asia. These are the first markets that TikTok went into. It's further ahead, and this is a time black hole in terms of attention. In China, roughly between ByteDance and its competitors for short video, roughly a quarter of all time online is spent in short video. I think that's very possible to be the same globally within 3 to 4 years. So that's a huge shift in like where you're acquiring users, where you're advertising, where you're going to do your organic content marketing. All of this stuff is going to shift towards short video. It's not just TikTok. Facebook has Reels. YouTube has YouTube Shorts now. There's going to be a ton of clones of this format appearing everywhere. In China, it is even like Alibaba and Pinduoduo have it integrated into e-commerce platforms. I don't think it's unrealistic to say that one day Amazon will have short video in their app, in a very similar way to how TikTok works with the swipe up motion. That's what, that would be unimaginable in China, 3 years ago. Today, it's common. Everyone's doing it because it's just such a compelling format. And it's compelling in terms of the data it collects from the user, from the back end, and it's compelling in terms of the user experience. And so it's a bit like how we saw shorts, with Snapchat came out with this, this innovation that Facebook copied, right? With the pucks at the top. And that basically became integrated into every platform now where you've got that. But you're seeing the same thing here with like the short video will become integrated across all of the big platforms. But TikTok's definitely leading. I mean, they've got a market leading position in this format, short video, and I don't see them going anywhere. The main risk to them was political risk, Donald Trump trying to ban them, and the anti-China sentiment across Western markets. And we did see in India they did get banned, right? And that was a big market for them. So that's the main risk, is the political risk. In terms of the actual product and the team and the execution, there's no, this has got a long way to go, long runway still, and is basically the most important internet trend of the last 3 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you made some lot of valid, relevant points, and especially how the app was banned in India, and Trump wanted to split TikTok from ByteDance, and I want to talk about Yiming Zhang, who's the founder of the company, and he's recently had to step down, but what was his early startup experience, which helped in building the strategy for ByteDance, and do you think that was relevant for a founder to have that sort of experience? Because obviously you have Mark Zuckerberg, who had no experience, who went on to build one of the greatest media companies, but you have Yiming, who did have a couple of years of experience before he started off ByteDance.
Yiming's a very impressive founder. I think the foundations for TikTok's success come back to him. But it's a little bit difficult to see that from someone who doesn't understand the history. That's through reading the book. I think that's one of the core things that hit home. I've had people from all the big companies reach out essentially saying, it really helped me understand where this is coming from, right? Like essentially Yiming started the company in 2011, I think, in Beijing, with the concept that we're moving into this mobile era, and away from desktop. In China, I think in India as well, it's probably the same, that there's this really, really clear divide in people's minds around mobile and desktop eras. And it's like very, very, Chinese have this because it was such a big deal in China. But in Western markets, because of Web 1.0, Web 2.0 eras, the transition was slower and it wasn't as clear. People talk about it a lot, but they don't actually, it's not like China where it's just, okay, everything that happened in desktop, forget about it. Everything, forget about it. Like, this is just a fresh thing, and we don't. And it's also down to things like email don't work in China, and the open web basically isn't a thing in China. Everything happens in some kind of app, right? Whereas in Western markets, we still use the web a lot, like the open web. We still go to websites. We buy things directly from something.com. Like, nobody does that in China. Like, nobody. It's basically, you can't sell that way because the browser usage is so low. And then you see that's why Chinese don't. Baidu is not the same as Google, because the habits in China all shifted towards apps, and Baidu got kicked out of crawling that data. So that the usage habits so different. The founder found that, like, recommendation essentially is the thing that he went all in on. He said, like, okay, recommendation is essentially what will power content discovery in the mobile age. And there's a couple of things behind that. One, that screens are very small, and you don't have keyboards, you don't have mice, so you can't do accurate input. Typing on a phone is a terrible experience, right? Let's be honest. Like, even in English, it's terrible. It's on a piece of a slab of glass. People do it and put up with it, and it's been normalized. And I think people don't realize how terrible this experience is. It's just a very inconvenient, awful thing. And it's even worse in China because Chinese characters, they're okay to type out. There's pinyin systems, it's okay. But for educated people, it's fine. But for non-educated people, actually, they really don't like doing that, and seniors don't like doing that as well. So we find that voice messaging and video is much more common in the Chinese market as a way to communicate, mostly through WeChat. But recommendations, so you've got this environment where you've got this small screen. How do people use mobile? They use it like they open their phone 50 times a day, and most of the session times are very short, maybe 60 seconds. Maybe 2-3 minutes. That's very different to desktop and laptop. And so you've got this, and then you've got this information overload as well. That on the internet, there's just so much more. There's more podcasts, there's more blogs. Every year just keeps going and going and going. But everybody still only has 24 hours in a day. So these trends combine together to you realize, okay, actually with search engine, right, which we're all very familiar with, it's people looking for information. When you flip that on its head and make it recommendation engine, it's information looking for people. And they were actually very early to this in China, and even for Silicon Valley, quite early for this. If you go back a decade, before the sort of explosion of interest in AI, and the sort of the discoveries around deep learning neural networks. Before that came to fruition, there was just a concept that using machine learning to understand people's content preferences could never match a human editor, right? It could never possibly compete with a human. That was actually a commonly held view, and so. Today, that seems ridiculous, that you could ever think that. Like, machine learning has proven to be extremely powerful and better than humans at understanding content preferences. To give you one idea, there's this idea in China that if you use TikTok for 10 minutes, the Douyin, the version there, it can actually know your content preferences better than your spouse.
Well,
right? In that time, it will learn what you like faster and to a level that would surprise even close relatives that are there. And so I don't know how they work that out. It's probably just a rumor, but it is it's believable. It's believable because really, if you use the product yourself, from using TikTok. Initially, you might come in. A lot of first impression that people have around TikTok is that, this is not for me. It's just dancing and mimes and like things like that, lip sync. But at some point, if you keep with it, for not for very long either, for like maybe 10, 20 minutes, it just starts to very accurately predict what you want to see and becomes very personalized in terms of the content that it shows you. And so everyone's TikTok is different, right? So, even people at ByteDance, I know the PMs, they have 8 or 9 different TikToks. Like, they just log in and log out of their different accounts because they're testing like different content funnels, because they're so different. And they deliberately train the algorithm in different ways so that they can test different things. Yeah, because it's so personalized, right? It's like it really is very, very. Everyone sees a different TikTok. Having said that, there's certain videos that go viral and they get such wide reach that everyone ends up seeing 1 or 2 of the same things.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the core insight around this power of this recommendation is what Yiming really, really believed in, and then. The company behind it, ByteDance, they went out and built a recommendation engine at a time in China where nobody knew how to do that. There was basically they had to teach themselves. They couldn't hire anyone. There was a small team working for Hulu in Beijing that actually had some people that knew how to do it. That was it. In the whole of China, 1.4 billion people, basically no one knew how to build a recommendation engine. So that's how early they were to it. And their early stuff was pretty basic in terms of personalization. But that was for articles. That Toutiao, their original flagship product, is basically the Facebook newsfeed without any friends, right? It's just articles and videos. And then later on, they took this experience and matched it with Musically, essentially the Musically experience, and combined. And then that when they hooked those two things together, it just exploded, and that's where we really saw this. Without why is ByteDance the one to do TikTok and not Facebook or Google or some other, or Snapchat or whatever? It's down to that. They were actually done all of this work years and years before, building up a big data scientist team and working on recommendation as being their core competency, and that's what's really powered the TikTok experience in many ways, is that data flywheel that's so strong, and that the personalization, which is making it a really compelling experience. But on the other side, you also have this the Chinese ecosystem around what we call content operations, and this is a sort of area of internet products that operations is really weird, because it's something that everyone does in China, but nobody does in Silicon Valley. And so this is one of the reasons why TikTok was able to grow so fast and do things, and why Facebook and other companies had a really bad time trying to copy it. Because they did, right? Like Facebook did something called Lasso, and they tried to copy it like before Reels, and it completely failed because they didn't understand operations at all. Was one of the reasons. And so this operations is just about, it's a very manual thing of like hiring lots of people. It doesn't scale very well. You actually just have to hire lots of people and then manage creators on the platform. They do lots and lots of things that don't scale to help foster ecosystem and community and promote and do all these things that only humans can do. It's not data driven. So but it's effective. It really works, and there's a lot to be unpacked there. I don't know if they do it in India, but I would imagine that most of the companies now in the mobile space are looking towards China and looking towards what's happening in that market as where the new ideas are coming out. And it's not a case of you just take TikTok, right? What Facebook was doing was they were saying, okay, Douyin's exploded in China, let's just build a clone and test that in Mexico. That just copying and pasting doesn't actually work very well, because the Chinese are doing a lot of things behind the back. You can't see just from opening the app. There's this whole ecosystem of operations going on, which is very, very important, and a driver, especially for content apps like TikTok.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think Indian ecosystem really looks up to what China does, because I think the cultures are very similar. And also, when it comes to expansion to other South Asian countries, like you mentioned, they're still in the early stages. What were some of the expansion strategies that they did in India, Japan, US, which worked for them, and what are some of the growth hacks which help? It could help listeners who are trying to build consumer apps. But what do you think were interesting information which you?
Yeah, I mean, so I think this stuff is in the book. I put around sort of like how they, in the early days of the very, very earliest markets they went into for TikTok, and a bit about what they did there. Surprisingly, one of them was Japan, which is surprising because Japan's so tough. It's like one of the toughest markets globally to introduce a new internet service into. And it's particularly tough if you're Chinese, because the Japanese are not very welcoming of Chinese internet products. So it's surprising that they chose that market as one of the first. I mean, geographically it makes sense, but otherwise it doesn't. But they did, and that was actually the first TikTok office outside China was in Tokyo. It was a very small, like scrappy little office where they started out of a WeWork, I think. But yeah, they were doing, they already had the product, right? So they had this like amazing AI in the background, like their back end is really global best in class. The product itself is solid. They just need to get this content ecosystem flying, this local, build this local ecosystem of content creators. And a lot of that's operations around manually like approaching influencers, managing what they call in China KOL, KOC. So the KOL is the big influencers and up to mega celebrities. There's one strategy for those guys, and then there's a sort of grassroots strategy of like, okay, how do we just build these smaller influencers and foster that ecosystem? And that's doing things, just like opening up chat, manually reaching out to them one by one. Hey, I'm from the platform. Get into this chat group and we can talk. And then like feeding them ideas, like, okay, this is trending. Like on TikTok, it's a content platform where if you've managed, there's new hashtags every day, there's new filters every day, there's new songs that trend every day. And so what you don't see is behind the scenes, these operations teams, manually sending out information to creators on the platform saying, hey, use this hashtag. Hey, this is trending now. You might want to do this. Or like, this is grown up in China, so we think it's probably going to do well in Japan as well. You might want to copy this. That kind of manual work it takes a lot of people, but it's really effective because you do end up building this ecosystem much, much faster. Now that can happen organically, right? If your product's good enough, that flywheel will start, Twitter never did that, right? Like back in the days, but like this was the early days of internet where there was no competition and you're just riding this wave of like everything's new and like nobody really knows how this works. Today, everyone's competing for attention. Everyone's there's a new platform coming in. If you're not doing this and someone else is, you're at a severe disadvantage. And so that's how it works in the China market, is because your competitors are doing this, they're hiring a big team to, talk to influencers or like work out sort of like cross promotion deals with other apps and things like this, or doing offline events, even things like that, to really like, okay, we know that we've got in this city like a small ecosystem of like mid-sized creators. What happens if we get them to meet up? We'll send someone over there. All of the there's many of these like different tactics. Like I said, it's not just one tactic, right? It's like all of these different things combined. That if your competitors are doing that, you're not doing that, they're just going to blow you out the water, right? There's no way you're going to be able to scale as fast as they can. In other interesting things, going back to Japan, they worked out that, okay, in Japan, people don't like to put their faces on social media. Actually in Japan, Twitter is still the biggest social network. That surprised me.
Interesting.
And people like Twitter because they run multiple profiles and they don't use their faces, they use anonymous profiles. And so that speaks to how actually you would expect TikTok to do very badly in Japan, because it's all about showing your face. It's all about being individual, right? It's whereas Japan's more of a collective society where individualism isn't celebrated in the same way it is in, say, America, which is a very individualistic society, right? It's the total opposite. So, I mean, that's why for short form video, the user group that you saw that did really well for short video was teenagers, right? It was young people with Musical.ly, because they were just so individualistic and so free to express themselves in video and talk to a camera. That's sort of a side thing, but like really, really interesting is that if you go back even 4 years, no, certainly 4, maybe even 3 years now, the perception in North America and in Europe around like someone actually picking up a phone and looking at the camera and filming themselves to make a short video was considered really strange, right? It was considered to be something that was an adult should not do, right? It's like, if you went down the street in LA doing that 4 years ago, people would be, a lot of people would look at you. Today, it's just been normalized, right? Nobody thinks anything of it. But that change in societal norms has taken place over the last 3 to 4 years. In many, I'm not saying every market. I'm sure there's some markets where that was fine to do that. I mean, even in China, that was considered a little bit strange 3 to 4 years ago. I think today it's really, you can see it a lot more. But yeah, this change in Japan was particularly difficult, right? That you had to get to normalize people talking to a video, filming themselves and putting that on the internet. So one of the things they did is they specialized in using filters that obscured your face somehow a little bit.
No.
So they pushed those ones more, and then they also pushed a lot of challenges that involved people collaborating together to create content. So it wasn't so individualistic. It was more about, hey, let's make this video with friends, or stitching things together or doing duets and things like that. So that was the sort of localization there in terms of what they pushed in terms of content for Japan.
Got it. And I've been part of a community called On Deck Podcast Fellowship, and we're looking at new user acquisition strategies. And one of the fellows told me about TikTok as a user acquisition channel, and where you're getting if not millions of views, but hundreds of thousands of views, which is just not possible on YouTube anymore. But what do you think about e-commerce on TikTok and user acquisition channel? Should people use newer platforms like TikTok because something like YouTube is totally saturated?
Yeah, definitely. That's the basic logic, right? That new platforms is where you get free traffic or low price traffic, and that's not specific to. We see that again from email in the 90s through to today. Every platform rises up. And when it rises up in that early rising stage, you're going to see an imbalance of high demand, low supply of content. And so you're easy to acquire attention and acquire users. And if it's e-commerce, you can make sales. Like I said, TikTok's still in the early days. It's still growing fast. In terms of time spent, overall, the amount of hours spent on a platform is still growing very fast. And there's still opportunities. It's the best platform for a startup to work on, as long as it's a suitable industry, a suitable vertical that can actually work for this platform. Some of them can't. It's not that great for B2B, right? So like if you're doing anything in B2B area, TikTok might not be a great choice. But if you're doing something, let me just give you the best example, which is another Chinese company called Shein, right? E-commerce company that does fashion. I released a big article on them about a week ago now. They're probably the fastest growing e-commerce company in the world. And they do extremely well on TikTok with a very, very simple strategies that basically many of their competitors could have been using, but they just weren't savvy enough. And I think they're catching up now, but Shein's so far ahead that it's difficult for them to gain the same momentum. But this was something that basically any fashion company, e-commerce, platform could have done. But they just, the Chinese were there first. They understood how to use TikTok because Douyin, it comes from China. And it's, like I said, about 2 years ahead in China. So they know how to market in China, and they're just taking these strategies and applying them internationally now. And so that you'll see the Chinese companies are the best in terms of TikTok marketing. But it's, the strategies they're using, it's not rocket science. It's with Shein, they encourage creators or just very small accounts. In fact, everyone, you can post a video to TikTok with the hashtag Shein haul and show what you bought and just put it on, and it works very well because it's like fast paced, right? You can show like 5 outfits in 30 seconds if you want, just quickly, because Shein's quite cheap. That works quite well, and then there's a chance that they'll repost you to the main Shein account. Like they'll just take your video, and so you can, if you do get that as a small account, it's going to drive a lot of followers and attention to you. So you've got this win-win scenario. and that they've been doing that for quite a while, and it's very effective. And they do that themselves, and they work with influencers, small and large, on the platform. And I think they probably do advertising on there as well now that it's open. But again, like, it's not. I don't think it's something that is particularly. It's just about execution, right? It's not. There's no great, amazing strategy there, and it works well for them. I think if you're doing e-commerce for any category where you've got a product that you can display and demonstrate in an interesting way quickly, then TikTok's absolutely the platform for you.
Right. No, interesting, because you pointed about Shane, which is like a very secretive e-commerce company. I had no idea they're $10 million in revenue. In fact, in India, when people used to buy from Shane, I thought it's low quality products, but it's really taken over in US, ranking above Amazon. It's something very interesting. I want to talk about TikTok CEO stepping down, and also if you look at Jack Ma from Alibaba, he's also stepped down. Is it because of the government who's cracking down and making sure that the companies don't become larger than size? What's the story?
No, I think that's a narrative that Western media pushes way more than they essentially, all of the media in the West loves that narrative and pushes it without really much evidence. And it's just these companies, the CEOs was, Jack Ma stepped down. Jack Ma's really old, right? Like he's the company's like 1999 when they started, right? So, and he wasn't young when he started it. Like, he should be stepping down, right? Like that's quite, there's nothing there unusual. I think the more interesting examples are Pinduoduo and now ByteDance. With ByteDance, I think both of those entrepreneurs, the founders there, Colin Huang and Zheng Yiming, are friends. They know each other. I think they're both coming from the same place. And I think the actual letter that Yiming wrote, which they published publicly when he made that announcement, to me makes so much sense. I mean, it's in China, don't be fooled into thinking the CEO is the most important person in the company. It's not. That's just he's just put someone there that he totally trusts, someone who's been a lifelong friend, who's been in the company, playing behind the scenes, head of HR, or at one point he was technical director in the early days. Someone who's technically very savvy, right? Understands what they're doing, can understand the technology aspect of what they're doing, is great with HR, which is one of the most important functions. And then they've also got the new CEO of TikTok, Joseph Chu, who's now the CFO, who is from the financial aspect. He's going to be leading things forward. That makes total sense. I think he will totally do a better job than the founder on that, given his background. So they've really got their bases covered quite well. And for Yiming, knowing, from researching him and knowing his childhood, his background, he's done so many interviews in Chinese that never got published in English, but all of the highlights I put into my book, with all of that combined, it makes total sense what he's doing. He doesn't, being a CEO is really super stressful, and you've got lots and lots of day-to-day stuff that you have to do, which doesn't really drive long-term growth. A CEO's job is actually quite short-term in most of it. You're meant to think long-term as well, but the reality is you get bogged down in a lot of detail and a lot of putting out fires and stuff, which especially in the last 12 months, they've been doing a lot of that, right? Like it's been mostly putting out fires, which has been the CEO's job in the past 12 months. So it's understandable that I feel that if he's got a strong team, which he has, the team's very strong now in terms of the executives in who they've got involved there, that he would want to focus on what he loves and what has really driven the company, which is his insights around where things are moving long term. And that requires a lot of research and a lot of deep thinking and a lot of you can't be distracted every day with all of this stuff if you want to do that. So I think that when you look at all of these, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. I think Colin Huang is a similar case for Pinduoduo, that they want to move more into agriculture, and he wants to focus more on that. The companies are in good hands. So, nobody in China really thinks that Zheng Yimin is actually stepping down, right? That's thing to bear in mind. Like, nobody thinks that he's actually not in control anymore, right? He's in control, but like, just okay, I don't need to deal with day to day anymore, right? I like, if there's an actual important decision to be made, like, he's the one still calling the shot on that. So nothing's really changed in what's important, long-term strategic. I think the team there now, feels to me like very stable. I think like that executive team is going to be around for a long time. I think they've got the right mix now. So yeah, it's another reason to be bullish on ByteDance long-term prospects. I think they've really got a strong team.
Correct. And I want to talk about censorship of content, especially it's a big issue in US with Facebook and Google and Twitter being called out last year about content. But how do you think TikTok is managing to censor content?
Censor content on TikTok. I think TikTok was in the early days using very blunt methods. Like, they were just growing so fast, their team was so small, and they're a content platform. So content is so messy, right? Like, it's an area where you're essentially dealing with people, and so people are complex. There's good people, there's bad people. When people come online, that doesn't change, and so you get like lots of things, people making content that's illegal for various reasons in different areas, and then you're a startup TikTok we could say TikTok was a startup, during say 2017 and 18. And you have got no resources to deal with that kind of thing. So it's unsurprising, or very little resources. And so you have to just use very blunt tools and like have policies that get it roughly right. But until you can hire 100 people to deal with this, then that's all you can do. And so yeah, definitely there's, in the early days, I think a lot of stuff happening on the platform that with musically it was even worse, because it was well known that there was lots of pedophiles on the platform because there were so many young kids there, and that's well documented. And again, this is a startup. Musically at its peak had about 100 people on their team, so they just don't have the infrastructure and the resources to deal with that when you've got like 100 million users. Again, at their peak, probably 100 million MAU, something like that. So yeah, definitely stuff happened, and they're taking down stuff and doing all this kind of enforcing those rules unevenly, right? And I'm sure there's lots of case studies. There are lots of case studies of terrible things happening through the platform. And then there's the other question of is ByteDance censoring content because the Chinese government's telling it to do that? Again, this is a narrative that Western media really loves. Talking about the evidence for it is very, very little. I haven't seen any compelling evidence. There's circumstantial evidence, like there's like this. I did a search for this and it came up with that, and da 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 da. Again, to be fair, it's quite difficult to prove this stuff, right? It's an algorithm. Like, how do you prove that it's doing this and not doing that? When all of that stuff is happening on the back end, but you can't see. But still, there's actual no evidence of that really. And TikTok today is separate from the infrastructure in China, right? They've completely separated it, which was very difficult for them to do, but they've done it. And that means that they are genuine when they say it's hosted outside China now. It's not, it's not connected to the Chinese teams. They can't access, if the government in China wanted that data, we couldn't even give it to them type thing. that wasn't the case maybe 3-4 years ago. And I know from, Chinese teams could absolutely access data from international users if they wanted to. So definitely there's a case that that could have happened, several years ago. And maybe there was cases of that happening. I don't know. But like back in 2018, let's say, TikTok was totally just using back-end infrastructure from China, and there's totally teams in Beijing saying, can you give me user data for, Argentina, blah, 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 and they'd just get that data raw and like all of that personal information. But I don't think that's, my understanding is that's really not the case today and hasn't been for the past year. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a great insight. I just quickly want to do the top 3. What's your favorite business book?
My favorite business book, I would say business book, but maybe marketing book. I really like this book. I've reread it recently. Trust Me, I'm Lying.
Oh, okay.
By Ryan Holiday, and it's probably his best book. It's his first book, and I think that book is really for online marketing, for understanding how online works in terms of media and in terms of social media, and it's just promotion and all of that. It's the most truthful book ever written that I know of, and I think it's still very relevant today for understanding how that ecosystem works.
Yeah, no, I think I'm a big fan of Ryan Holiday because of all his Stoic books. I think he's done a couple of them, which is very good. If you could go back in time when you started writing Attention Factory, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
With writing the book?
Yeah.
Well, the biggest, I wish I had more time to cover India in the book. That's a big regret. And then when I started writing, I never knew that Donald Trump would get involved, and suddenly it would become such a big media story. And so, I didn't really plan to. I sort of finished the book as that was happening, and so I couldn't really cover that. Maybe knowing that, I would have probably given myself a couple more months to get over that and release the book a little bit later, and so I could have put that in the final chapter, perhaps. But there's no way I could have really foreseen that. And then there's lots of sort of like things that you learn along the way, and so the next book will be better in terms of like style, content, editing, all of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when the ban happened in India and US, it was a big story back then. But yeah.
And that happened while I was writing. Like this. I just woke up one day and like, oh, by the way, TikTok's banned in India. I'm like, what? Okay, how do I? I'm finishing this up, and then all of this crazy stuff happens while you're just finishing the story. And I just realized, like, this is breaking news. I can't really cover this in the moment. Anything I write would be just outdated because I don't know if it's going to be banned and then not banned, right? It could just be like a temporary ban, and then if you write about it, it would just be like, why is he writing about this? So but it's a nice problem to have.
Right, correct. And do you have any favorite online tools, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom?
Nothing. I'd like to mention one relevant here. I think CapCut, for people who might not be aware of it, is it's currently doing very well in American markets, and I guess Europe as well. It's actually also by ByteDance. It's a video editing app for mobile, and it's the best tool you can use to edit TikTok videos that I know of anyway, at least on the phone. I'm sure not using some heavy professional editing software suite, but if you just want something that's free, it's actually very good. And so, I would recommend that.
I will put that in the show notes. Matthew, you also write a Substack, and you've come out with a book. What is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about your book and your Substack? Yeah, so
my new Substack is going to be about Chinese retail and e-commerce and brand innovation. Basically, there's just we're entering the very beginnings of a golden era in terms of Chinese brands. You think about the last 100 years and all of these great American brands that we know, like Nike or Starbucks, or all these household names in retail and areas like that. China's really just, now all of these companies are starting to come up, and they're very digital, they're very savvy in what they're doing, they're working out different models, and I think they're just going to wipe the floor with a lot of the brands that are global names right now. Shein's currently the best example of that. So yeah, I want to cover that on the Substack. We'll link to that, I guess. And then I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. Those are the two platforms where you can find me. And then the book as well, obviously.
We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking your time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.